The date is July 27th, 1402. It's a chaotic, hot summer evening for the inhabitants of Ankara. For the last 3 days, the city has been besieged by Emir Timur and his large host of over 60,000 warriors. Only the feeble garrison of Ankara of a few hundred men stood between Timur and the future fate of the city. However, during this desperate ordeal, an Ottoman soldier on the battlements spotted a large dust cloud off in the distance, coming from the northeast. Then, all of a sudden, the drums and trumpets of the Ottoman Meta band began to echo throughout the countryside, and soon Ottoman banners and even the imperial standard of the Ottoman Sultan started flooding the horizon, much to the relief of the people of Ankara. The following morning would see two of the most powerful rulers of the Islamic world clash heads in a battle which would decide the fate not only of Ankara, but also the future of their two realms. Making all that noise, clearly the Ottomans wanted people to know they were coming. Here's one technique they missed though: they didn't have the new highly visible Hyperlime gear from our sponsor Ridge at ridge.com/kingsandgenerals. This is a new range of Ridge products decked out in the unique fluorescent yellow found in high-performance equipment, which makes sure it doesn't go unseen day or night. Most important is the classic Ridge wallet, a simple, effective and reliable way to carry up to 12 cards. And now you won't be losing it in the dark or going unnoticed when you flash the cash anytime. But if you get the wrong attention, don't worry, its RFID blockers will keep you safe from digital thieves. But one thing you really don't want to lose is your keys, so upgrade to the Ridge Key Case, a stylish way to carry 6 keys that is now extra hard to lose and extra easy to use even if you're fumbling at your door in the dark. These everyday upgrades come with a 99-day money-back guarantee, so even if you don't prefer them to your current setup, you can go back for free. And if you like them, you can keep them around forever thanks to Ridge's lifetime warranty. Check out the whole collection at our link below, ridge.com/kingsandgenerals. And to top it all off, use our code KINGSANDGENERALS to get a 10% discount off your order. In the years after their victory at the Battle of Nicopolis, the Ottomans turned their attention to the east as new opportunities for conquests opened up in the region. The successful military campaigns of Sultan Bayezid I during the years between 1397 and 1399 had seen the Ottoman Sultanate expand its territories into eastern Anatolia, defeating the last vestiges of Turkic opposition in the wider area. In addition to consolidating Edirne's reach on the plateau, the Ottoman Sultan took advantage of a politically divided Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt to his south and made headway into the Taurus Mountains and Cilicia, resulting in the vassalage of the Dulkadirid beylik and the conquest of the major crossroad town of Wallachia. However, the fast pace of the Thunderbolt's conquests had unintended consequences, for now the sons of Osman stood at the doorsteps of a far more dangerous enemy to their east, the ever-growing Timurid Empire, led by their namesake emir, Timur. Coming to power during a time when Central Asia was embroiled in the turmoil caused by the rapid decline and dissolution of the Mongol successor states of the Ilkhanate and Chagatai Khanate, Timur and his followers would go on to build one of the most formidable Muslim states of the late medieval era. Starting out as the petty warlord of the Balas tribe, the Turco-Mongol ruler would go on to conquer most of the Eastern Islamic world in a series of ruthless military campaigns reminiscent of the Mongol invasions of the early 13th century. While the Ottomans were preoccupied with Christian armies in Kosovo and Nicopolis, Timur and his followers were on a bloody mission to restore the former empire of Genghis Khan. Beginning with the western portion of the former Chagatai Khanate, over the decades, many regions fell to the war machine of the ruler of Samarkand. By the turn of the century, the Timurid realm stretched from the Armenian highlands in the west all the way to the Indus River Valley in the east, thus making it one of the most powerful and influential Islamic states of its age. As Timur's domains now bordered the Ottoman Sultanate, many of the adversaries of Edirne, such as the many disenchanted Turkoman nobles of Anatolia, saw an opportunity to escape the Ottoman yoke. Bayezid's conquest of Anatolia during the course of the last decade had brought to an end the independence of many local Turkic beyliks of the plateau, and thus their former ruling class were either imprisoned, forcefully incorporated into the Ottoman army as auxiliaries, or were entirely displaced from their holdings altogether. As Timur's empire in the east grew in strength, many of the displaced Turkoman nobility of Anatolia flocked to the Turco-Mongol ruler of Samarkand in the hopes of regaining their possessions from the tyrant of Edirne. Concurrently, many notables from Iraq and Azerbaijan who had been displaced by Timur's recent invasions took refuge at the court of the Ottoman Sultan. Some of these notables included Sultan Ahmed Jaliyir of the Jaliyirid dynasty and Sultan Kara Yusuf of the Karakayunlu. As a result of the policy of hosting political rivals against each other, relations between Edirne and Samarkand began to turn sour by the turn of the century. As an Ottoman-Timurid Cold War set in during the spring of 1400, while Timur was preoccupied with a bloody military campaign in Azerbaijan and Georgia, Bayezid, in an act of defiance against the ruler of Samarkand, took over the towns of Erzincan and Kemer from Mutahatan Bey, a local Turkoman noble who had defected from Edirne and declared for Timur. Not taking kindly to an open attack on his new vassal, Timur responded to the Ottoman incursion with a military campaign of his own. During the fall of the same year, the Turco-Mongol ruler struck deep into eastern Anatolia in a surprise invasion, recapturing Erzincan and Kemer, in addition to putting the Ottoman regional capital of Sivas under siege. Bayezid, who was at the time still leading the ongoing blockade of Constantinople, was unable to respond to the Timurid counterattack. After an 18-day standoff, Sivas would eventually surrender, and so on Timur's orders, its local garrison was horrifically buried alive. After the sack and conquest of Sivas, the Timurid ruler turned south and captured Malatya before heading off to begin his military campaign in the Levant against the Mamluks. While Cairo was still paralyzed by political infighting, Timur, in a short and decisive campaign, brutally sacked and occupied the Mamluk Levantine cities of Aleppo, Hama, Homs, Baalbek, and Damascus. However, while the Turco-Mongol ruler was preoccupied with his Mamluk campaign, the developments from Anatolia began trickling into his tent. The defiant Sultan of the Ottomans, having decided not to stay idle while his newly acquired lands were ransacked, was on the counterattack. By the summer of 1401, Ottoman forces had marched back into eastern Anatolia, recapturing the towns of Sivas, Erzincan, and Kemer back from the Timurids. It is here that the two monarchs of Edirne and Samarkand began their famous correspondence with a series of letters sent to each other's courts. Both men accused the other of infidelity and faithlessness to the core tenets of Islam, in addition to bringing up the topic of hosting political rivals in each other's courts. Timur first sent letters to Bayezid urging him to expel the rulers of the Jaliyirids and Karakoyunlu from his lands, lest he bring his wrath upon him. Bayezid responded by stating that the Turco-Mongol ruler should not confuse him with the sultans of Persia, and that the helpless armies of Iraq, Khorasan, and the Mamluks were nothing in comparison to the strength of his armies. The Ottoman Sultan also added that Timur's bloody military campaigns and his sack of many Muslim cities had made him and his followers dishonor the faith. To fight is our habit, to join in combat our aim, to struggle for the faith our task. Bayezid I. The Timurid ruler responded likewise, stating that his soldiers were the sons of Muslims, unlike the Devshirme ranks of the Ottoman army, and that Bayezid should immediately relinquish his recent conquests in eastern Anatolia to him. There were other provocative letters, which included Timur comparing Bayezid to an ant, or Bayezid writing his name in large gold letters with Timur's in small black letters, and threats to each other's spouses and concubines. During the multiple rounds of letters, both the prideful and ego-filled rulers of Edirne and Samarkand continued to make their case for being the greater Islamic ruler over the other. With no political progress being achieved by the diplomatic bout, and Bayezid unwilling to submit to Timur's demands of surrendering eastern Anatolia, it was clear that war was on the horizon. After suppressing a local revolt in Baghdad initiated by Ahmad Jaliyir from the safety of Ottoman lands in 1401, which ended with the bloody sack of the city, Timur officially began preparing for war against Bayezid. First stationing his forces in Azerbaijan for the winter, during the spring of 1402, Timur officially declared war against Edirne and began marching on eastern Anatolia. In quick succession, and without real resistance, Kemer, Erzincan and Sivas again fell to the Timurid ruler. As Timur crossed into Ottoman territory, Bayezid was startled out of his blockade of Constantinople and began preparations to meet the Turco-Mongol ruler in open battle. First consolidating his Balkan and Anatolian forces in Bursa, Bayezid set out on a rapid march eastwards, stopping briefly at Ankara. There, he was urged by his military officers to make camp and prepare for Timur's arrival, as the local region was well supplied with water and food, and was easy to defend against an attacker due to the hilly terrain. However, loathing the idea of allowing Timur to raid his eastern provinces freely, Bayezid left a small garrison behind in Ankara and sped east to Sivas, hoping to negate Timur's cavalry superiority in the Pontic Mountains. After a couple of days of force marching his army eastwards, near the outskirts of Tokat, the Thunderbolt met and skirmished with what he thought was the Timurid vanguard and beat them back out of the region. However, in a shocking revelation revealed after the fact, Bayezid and his host had only engaged a diversionary force. While Bayezid was in Tokat, the main Timurid host had cut southwest, taking Kayseri, and was now besieging Ankara. The Ottoman host, in a quick hurry, doubled back to Ankara at full speed under the hot Anatolian summer heat, and as a result, thousands were lost in the forced march. Being low on water and supplies, the exhausted Ottoman army finally arrived on the outskirts of Ankara and made its camp on the nearby Chubuk plain to the north of the town during the second half of July. Facing a situation similar to the one at Nicopolis, the Thunderbolt made plans to relieve his garrison at Ankara by attacking Timur's host head-on, as he did with the Crusaders under King Sigismund. The Battle of Ankara was about to begin. The Timurid army outnumbered the Ottoman host by an estimated number of 90,000 to 60,000. Most of Timur's army was comprised of fearsome Chagatai Turkic horse archers, supported by various subject peoples, such as mounted Turkoman, Iranian infantry, and Armenians picked up en route. The army was organized with a center, 2 wings, and a reserve, with a vanguard before each section, and with Timur himself leading the center. His left was led by his youngest son, Shahrukh, and the right by his oldest living son, Miran Shah. The reserve was led by his grandson and heir, Muhammad Sultan. Ahead of the entire army was a row of 32 war elephants from India, clad in bright trappings, housing archers and naphtha throwers, and with swords fastened to their tusks, they were a living rampart to terrify the enemy. Bayezid's army, too, was made up of a diverse set of soldiers, encompassing the various regions of his realm. The Ottoman Sultan commanded the centre, alongside his Grand Vizier Jandelizade Ali Pasha and the Sultan's 3 sons, Shahzades Isa, Musa and Mustafa. They were protected by the Sultan's Kapikulu Guard, made up of several thousand elite janissaries and Kapikulu Sipahi heavy cavalry, in addition to archers and light Azab infantry placed in the vanguard. Bayezid's eldest son and presumptive heir, Suleiman, commanded the left wing, made up of troops mainly from the Balkans, and a large body of recently hired Tatars from the local region. Meanwhile, another son of the Sultan, Mehmed, commanded the rearguard, alongside a contingent of Karakayunlu cavalry. Lastly, the right wing was composed of mainly Anatolian troops, led by the Sultan's late tutor and veteran of the battles of Kosovo and Nicopolis, Kara Timurtash Pasha. The Ottoman Pasha was joined by the Sultan's loyal vassal and brother-in-law Stefan Lazarevic of Serbia, who commanded 5,000 of his own retinue of heavy cavalry from Europe. During the early hours of July 28th, the armies of the 2 most powerful rulers of the Islamic world began their struggle for Ankara. Sources differ on who attacked first, but we know that the battle was initially joined between the Ottoman left and Timur's right. Fighting was fierce, and troops under Suleiman were hard-pressed, but managed to hold their ground despite the thunderous impact of enemy elephants and their own weariness and thirst. Simultaneously, Timur commanded his left wing to attack the Serbs on the Ottoman far right, while he engaged the Ottoman center. However, the heavily armoured knights of Stefan Lazarevic not only held their ground and offered fierce resistance against the Timurid attack, but were even able to go on the offensive. After absorbing the initial assault, the Serbian knights gained the upper hand by slashing through the lightly armoured lines of the Timurid left, driving them back towards their camp. However, seeing that his numerically inferior Serbians had overextended themselves during their pursuit, Bayezid ordered them to halt and regroup with the rest of the Ottoman right wing. As predicted by the Ottoman Sultan, the Timurid left was later reinforced by reserves, and now they began a counter-offensive of their own. Now that he was on the counter-attack, Timur pulled an ace from his sleeve and initiated his surprise plan to surround the Ottoman left wing. The Turco-Mongol ruler had been in touch with Bayezid's Tatars long before the battle, and had persuaded them to join his struggle against the tyrant of Edirne. During the heat of battle, the Tatar auxiliaries on the Ottoman left flank suddenly changed sides, joining Timur and attacking the rear of the already wavering forces of Suleiman. Bayezid's son Mehmed, who was commanding the reserve, responded by attacking the Tatars from the rear, and although the move alleviated some of the pressure on the Ottoman left, the numbers were on the Timurid side, and Suleiman continued to give ground. With defeat almost certain, the heir apparent of the Ottoman Sultanate struck back at the Tatars and broke through them, starting his retreat back to Edirne. The news of the sudden collapse of the Ottoman left wing spread through Bayezid's ranks like wildfire, and as a result, a general panic erupted. Upon hearing the devastating news on the opposite side of the battlefield, the Anatolian auxiliaries, led by the former notables of the recently conquered Turkic beyliks, also switched sides and began harassing the Ottoman right and centre from the rear. It is most likely that these Turkoman nobles saw an opportunity to regain their independence from Edirne by working closely with Timur, and thus betrayed their liege lord in his darkest hour. As chaos and confusion engulfed the Ottoman army, Timur's entire army began a general advance forward, resulting in heavy Ottoman casualties. The still loyal Stefan Lazarevic, who had just learned that the Anatolian auxiliaries had betrayed their cause, disengaged the battered Timurid left and attacked them from the rear, cutting his way through to Bayezid. Upon arriving at his tent, the Serbian prince urged his sultan to flee the battlefield while there was still time. However, scorning the advice of his loyal vassal, Bayezid instead retreated to the hill of Çataltepe behind the Ottoman lines. There he would, with his janissaries and some of his household guards, prepare to make a last stand against Timur, while the rest of his army retreated from the battlefield. With Shahzadeh Suleiman, Mehmed, Isa, and now his Serbians gone from the corpse-filled Chubuk plain, the Ottoman Sultan, with two remaining sons, Musa and Mustafa, led what was left of the Ottoman army in a hopeless struggle against all odds. Fighting shoulder to shoulder with their men, axe in hand, the members of the House of Osman fought with vigour and threw back multiple Timurid charges from the hill. This gallant but hopeless defence went on for some hours, until darkness began to fall, and Bayezid's thoughts at last turned to flight. With 300 or so cavalry, he tried to break out to the east. Timur's men, fearing that the greatest prize of all might yet elude them, pursued hotly, and the Sultan was captured when his horse stumbled and threw him off. With his capture, the Ottoman disaster was complete. By sunrise on the 29th of July, Bayezid was brought in bonds to Timur, and the garrison of Ankara soon surrendered. The Battle of Ankara was over. The Ottomans lost more than 30,000 men during the course of the military campaign, against 15,000 casualties for Timur. The victor of Nicopolis was subject to the whims of the Great Emir, leaving his sultanate to suffer a 10-year civil war between his sons. Bayezid had gained the Ottoman throne on the battlefield back during the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, and since then he had won countless victories in Europe and Asia. However, flash forward 13 years, and he now relinquished that same throne on another battlefield. The Sultan of Rum, like the Roman Emperor Valerian before him, was now subjugated to a life of embarrassment at the hands of his captives. Although no contemporary source states that Bayezid was held in a golden cage, which is commonly told in popular retellings of his story, Major psychological damage had been done to the once prideful Sultan of the Ottomans, as his wife and 2 sons were taken captive alongside him. Timur now had free reign over western Anatolia. The rest of 1402 was spent pillaging across the region. Bursa, the former Ottoman capital, was taken as many Ottoman troops escaped Timur's clutches on Genoese and Venetian galleys, happy to accept payment to transfer them across the straits. Overnight, the Timurid victory at Ankara would reshape the entire geopolitical scene of the entire region, as it saw Constantinople being saved from the clutches of the Ottoman siege. With the tides turning in their favour, by the fall of the same year, Byzantine envoys en masse arrived in Anatolia and began showering Timur with gifts in the hopes of potentially forming an alliance against the remaining Ottomans. Also, as a result of the decisive battle, the Turkoman notables who had sided with the Great Emir were given back their independence from Edirne, thus reverting all the gains that Bayezid won in Anatolia during his 13-year reign. With the Ottoman Sultanate paralysed, and with the sacking of hospital-held Smyrna during the winter of 1402, Timur officially concluded his military operation in Anatolia and made his way back to his domains. However, by March of the next year, the former thunderbolt of the Ottomans was found dead while in captivity at Akshehir from either suicide via poison or an unknown illness. Even though he had died as a defeated man, Sultan Bayezid I was to be one of the most renowned members of the House of Osman in later centuries, as his lightning-fast military campaigns in Europe and Asia captured the imagination of future generations. Even with the death of their Sultan, all was not lost for the Ottomans, as the Timurid threat to their east would subside with the death of Timur 2 years later, which resulted in the rapid collapse of his former realm. In the next episode of our series on the early history of the Ottomans, we will look through the civil wars and intrigues between the sons of Bayezid and their struggle for the Ottoman throne. To ensure you don't miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.